And I think what all too often, my friend, many of us, many people they have more of their mentality dedicated to how do other people feel about me. Whereas the way we should be thinking of life is the other way around. How do I feel about me? And if I'm happy with me, other people's opinion of me does not matter.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
Today my guest is Dr. Mark Weisman. Dr. Mark, or the Alaska Ulfhednar, has worked with hundreds of what he calls friends to help them find a path to recovery from many different mental health challenges. Primarily working with former members of the military both in the U.S. and abroad to build futures through the darkness of PTSD, he uses the simplicity of his cultural heritage as a Norse shaman to restore lives and give hope. Mark has advanced degrees in religion, psychology, and telecommunications.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It is a blessing and an honor to join you.
Same here. It's an honor. Could you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a Celtic Norse shaman here in Alaska. I travel around providing therapy for those individuals who suffer from PTSD and other traumatic events in their lives. I also provide healing and the other shamanistic type of functions for many different groups of people. And so just living life and loving everyone around me.
That sounds great. I usually go right into the environment that you were in while you were growing up. How would you rate that environment? Were there any problems that you know of? Or was it pretty much a happy childhood?
Well, we never look at our previous life.
Previous life? Is that count as your childhood? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay. And those earlier lifetimes, our whole existence exists in this thing we call the present, which is a mere snapshot between the future and the past. It's not all inclusive. It's not very, very large. It's a sliver of our existence that our whole consciousness is involved in. And so for us to say, oh, hey, I had these previous experiences in a previous present, I could say, that could mean last week, that could mean last year, that could mean last decade.
Yeah.
Because they're all just a collection of my present at that point in my life. So, no, I think, as to what I remember, my father was a very strict German alcoholic, violent in nature. I grew up fast. I grew up believing in hope and seeking joy, and I grew up. I turned to a very bad place where I learned what not to do to the body with regards to alcohol and drugs. Wound up overdosing on heroin.
How old are you when you first started getting into drugs?
I would say preteen, so maybe 12, 11, somewhere in there.
Okay. And what kind of drugs were you doing?
We started with marijuana and moved to cocaine, and then ultimately, by the time I was about the middle of high school, we turned to heroin. Okay.
Did you feel that was because you were depressed, that you wanted to feel better?
No, I took that journey for a couple of different reasons, primarily to escape the guilt and anger I had at my father when my mother and father split. But then on the same note, I was also, and I still am, very empathic. And so I get emotional overruns from all those people around me. And in those days, I didn't understand it. I know I just felt all these wild emotions running through my body, and it made me kind of crazy. And so I found with the use of drugs that those voices were quieted, and I was able to kind of lose myself in the drugs instead of
Right.
getting overwhelmed by the emotions.
I got you. When I was 11, um, my world was rocked by moving from New Jersey to Alabama. I didn't realize at the time, but I always had ADHD. I always felt like everybody else was a Martian, or at least I was a Martian. And I went to this middle school in Alabama, and they all just picked on me and beat me up and all sorts of nice things like that. And I started getting OCD and then depression and anxiety. And to this day, I've solved a lot of them, but there are a lot that I still haven't solved. Now, you're coming at it, I guess, depression or mental health at an entirely different angle. Most people will talk about drugs, therapy, maybe cannabis, things like that. What is your philosophy as far as getting to a place in your life that you feel peace?
Well, I think, as I've come to learn now, mental peace, mental balance, mental contentment is a choice that we have. And we can make that choice anytime we desire. We just choose one way or the other. And what most often happens is that we carry with us emotions from the past that almost begins to make our decisions for us. And in lieu of making the hard choices, we choose to let the past drive the future. And this is certainly with emotional couplings with our event memories. So we have particular event memories from our past that are coupled up to some emotion, and usually they're extreme emotions. And these extreme emotions affect us even today, even though we may say, "Oh, we're beyond it." But there's a part of us that says we need to hang on to this. We need to, maybe we feel that there's a lesson to be learned that we haven't learned. I mean, there could be a multitude of reasons, but ultimately it all boils down to, as I've learned now, that we have a choice, and we can make that choice, and we can choose a different path at any time in our lives. We're not held to a chain to any of these emotional events that have happened in our lives. We can move on. We can learn the lesson, whatever lesson is to be learned, if there is a lesson, and we can then garner our hope, our love, and move forward with purpose to avoid that situation again, maybe, or
Right.
maybe to make a better one.
I'm sorry, I interrupt because I have ADHD,
No.
but it's hard for me to tell when you're done. That's always been a problem for me because people get mad at me at that and stuff. But I guess the thing is, I just think that there is a chemical inherited side of mental illness sometimes, maybe all the time. And I have treated a lot of it with drugs, and the drugs have worked for me mostly, but I still have what I call demons that haunt me every day, every single day. some days they're really strong. Other days I hardly notice them, but they're there. And I have not been able to figure out a way to just say goodbye to these demons. They own me. They control me. Um, I have to keep busy because sometimes if I don't keep busy, the thoughts go bad. The thoughts go dark. So I'm naturally a negative, depressed type of person who's trying his best somehow to find peace in the world. But I look at most people in this world, and quite frankly, I don't understand most of them. I don't understand religion. I don't understand the quest for money. I don't understand the quest for power. I don't understand a lot of these things that most people just take for granted. And my children have now become 30-ish or 40-ish, and they have pretty much divorced me because they don't understand me. They don't understand why I'm not like everybody else. They don't understand why I make mistakes. Why am I rude? Why am I this and that? And there's lots of people in groups and everywhere else that are like me. 1 in 20 people have ADHD severely. And it causes, I cannot play a guitar. I cannot play the piano. Nothing I can do perfectly for a long period of time. Everything I do is sculptured. Okay. So a lot of my listeners are ADHD listeners, and they're looking for answers. I'm looking for answers because we're not finding a lot of answers in this world as it is today. Yeah, because one of the things is all my life I've been pretty much a dopamine addict. With ADHD, you don't get enough dopamine, and it's a big problem. So I got a medicine that allows me to have the proper amount of dopamine. So I don't see how somebody with major depression can just make it go away. I don't see that.
But again, dopamine is one of those natural hormones in your body.
But I didn't get enough of it. I never got enough. And what I do is I get real nervous before I do something. That nervousness creates the dopamine and allows me to do and be good at what I'm doing. But it's painful, to go through that process of nervousness and then all of this. So when I got the medicine that helped me with the dopamine, it was like a switch went off and I completely changed from someone who slept all the time to someone who did things and found a reward out of doing them for the first time, maybe.
So, but my point is that we have a choice, that we can choose to set our mind to doing what we want it to do, not the other way around. I'm always reminded, one of my friends is a Olympic athlete, and they throw what's it called? The javelin. And I said, I throw sticks in the backyard all the time for the dog. And he said, well, it's a little different. My point is, he trains 365 days of the year. But what he has is a mindset, and he puts his mind to it. And to him, getting out every day and throwing this stick is the most important thing in his life, bar none. He'll go, if he misses his morning throw, I guess, whatever that is, he'll skip breakfast and go do it. He'll miss work to go do this. He will do whatever it takes to do this. And that is setting our mind. That is making a choice. he has made a choice that he is going to be the very best javelin thrower at the next Olympics. And he refuses, his mentality refuses to accept anything less.
But what I argue, I guess, is cause and effect. In other words, you wake up in the morning, you feel like shit. And every morning you wake up like that until one day you take a medicine and it's different. So I am very much for something. It doesn't have to be pharmaceuticals, but something that would make the brain work properly. Because for me, it doesn't work properly. I've been a Martian my whole life. I, like I said before, I don't understand people. People don't understand me. I don't understand this pursuit of money and power. But everyone has that pursuit. I mean, everyone that has a podcast wants money. How much money can I make? I don't have any need for that. I mean, I live on Social Security money, but my argument, I guess, is why or how can someone who is got all these problems piled up on each other, how can they find peace in a world where he feels that a lot of the people in it are just incompatible with him? I mean, what do you think of people in general? I mean, do you think people are good in general or bad in general? I mean,
I believe that every human being, or actually I should say every life force on this planet, has a capacity for love, and it has a capacity for defense. It's just the nature of life on the physical plane. So whether we choose to, be in full defensive mode all the time, or whether we choose to say, I'm going to get hurt, it's going to happen, that's okay, because I'm going to put energy out there and I'm going to make myself better. And I think what all too often, my friend, many people they have more of their mentality dedicated to how do other people feel about me. Whereas the way we should be thinking of life is the other way around. How do I feel about me? And if I'm happy with me, other people's opinion of me does not matter. If I have a relationship with my deities, with my spiritual entities, with me, other people do not matter. Other people's opinion of me do not matter.
Well, my children, who I love dearly, one of them has ghosted me and two of them barely talk to me. I can't come to grips with that for some reason. But go ahead.
No, I think you make a good point. Your point about your children, you've given them what they needed, and they're now on their own. And all of us, every living force comes to a place where they recognize what's around them. And sometimes that takes time. Sometimes that takes a very long time. And that's okay. They grow, they learn, they love, they come back. It's my kids are all grown now, and my daughter lives in Australia. My sons have families of their own, of which they spend plenty of time with. And I rarely see them, but when we see each other, of course, it's it's joy and love, because I respect what they've done, and I have their opinion of me inside Their opinion of me does not matter. I love them. But I love them unconditionally. So if they tell me tomorrow, Dad, we don't love you, you're out, I would find something else to do.
But I don't know if you.
They wouldn't do that. I know that because I know I'm good with me, and I'm good with my deities. Right. I'm good with my spirits. They need to grow and learn.
Right.
Not me.
Yes.
I've grown and learned.
I mean, they come to me with all the answers. They say, Dad, why don't you get it? We have those answers. You're going to hell. We're going to heaven. We're born again Christians. So you're kind of out of it. We really don't want to hear what you have to say about religion and or politics. So there's the dilemma. There's the rip, and it breaks my heart. And quite honestly, I don't know if you ever heard a song by Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You. Quite honestly, nothing compares to my children. They lit up my life. I love them as much as anyone could love somebody. And now they rejected me and said, go away. And it hurts. So that's one thing I try to resolve. The other thing I try to resolve, and I don't know what your opinion on this is once we're gone, we're gone. In my opinion, I don't see any evidence, anything that will tell me, oh, there's something else, that the universe is just not there. And for some reason we became humans. And when we die, in my opinion, that's it. So I feel like I'm on death row. That's the way I see life, that I'm on death row. And so I have those two problems, and I think other people may have similar problems that I can't reconcile. So what would you say about those issues if you were asked? And I'm asking.
Well, I think there's kind of a two-pronged thought process here. Again, the first prong that I want to adjust or take is I try not to come down too hard on Christianity as a whole, because Christianity as a religion is divided into two parts. It's divided into the spiritual side of it, the God, the love of God, the love of the spirits, and it's down to the practice side. And the practice side is where thou shalt believe what I believe, or else thou shalt go to hell, which is ridiculous. It would be like looking at a one-dimensional picture of a tree. Trees are three-dimensional. They just are. Okay, and by looking at it with one book, by looking at it with one set of eyes, you're not going to see the whole tree. You're going to see a very small fraction of the tree.
I think people like my children are binary thinkers. It's yes or it's no. And my daughter says, no, you're a bad person.
Well, they are. And that's Christianity. That's what 2,212 years of practice, of a practice that has said conform or die, has given us. That's the gift, the practice. That's what killed all of the indigenous peoples of the United States as they migrated, as the Easterners. That's what killed millions in Northern Europe as it migrated north. So the conform or die mentality that people are coming around to. They're coming around to recognizing, as the indigenous, particularly as we see the rise of the indigenous recognitions that they deserve, we're really seeing a kind of a resurgence of understanding that, wait, maybe, just maybe, this one perspective is but one perspective. It's not the whole picture. There's more to this. And so I've spoken with many of people over the years now, after I left the Christian church, that have said, oh, wait a minute, maybe there is another way to look at this. And that's what people are starting to see, and I think many people, your children included, will come to a place where they realize that if indeed they are speaking about a deity figure, a god, they would include in there this definition of the word infinite. He's an infinite being if they follow the doctrine of Christianity. And infinity means it's part of everything, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so infinity is really all inclusive. You can't kind of niche someone off and say, nope, you can't be part of this club because you think of different way. That defeats the idea of infinity.
But I am not part of their club. That's
yet.
The whole deal.
Not yet. You will be.
I hope that's true.
You will.
My ex-wife never came around. She sticks with her "this guy's crazy" routine card, and she plays that all the time to my kids. And my kids have finally said, I have to choose, and I choose the normal people.
And there will come a place, there will come a time, my friend, I can just as sure as I breathe, where people will recognize, your children included, will recognize that being different isn't so bad. Being different means that you are just going about a path that isn't well traveled. There are some seriously awesome views on paths that aren't traveled. So life can be very good on a path less traveled. Now, as far as your children go, I can tell you, my friend, there is an evolution, or I have seen in my experience of Christianity, as I maybe if folks read my webpage and the book, I was a former minister with the Christian church. I spent time, I became ordained, I followed the doctrine to the letter, which is why I know where it goes. But I think in every life of every Christian, there comes a point where you begin to increase your scope of understanding what they understand. The remember I told you in the two sides, but the spirituality side will eventually begin to seep out. Right now it's caged because it's caged by, like I said, 2,200 years of practice, of browbeat practice that said, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not do this. Those laws or rules, plus the imagined enforcement of those rules by generations upon generations upon generations of people, have distorted so badly the ideas that the original rules were written for. Okay. And so in many cases, because we were using religion in those days as a population control mechanism, we kind of boxed off the spirituality side, left that for the priests and the monks and a very select few, while the rest of us, we just lived according to the rules. Okay. And that's the practice. And so when you get to modern day America, where we're free to do whatever we so choose, well, not really, because this country was founded on Christian values. And we have an ancestry in some cases that goes back quite a few generations that are into the enforcement part. Not so much into the spirituality, because we go to church on Sundays and those guys handle the spirituality part. Okay. We just do what we're supposed to do. And then we let those guys handle their part of our gig to get us right on the end. And then we go around claiming, oh, well, a prime example, a good friend of mine says, oh, he will be condemned to hell if he doesn't save my soul. Well, my soul doesn't need saving, my friend. My soul is fine. Thank you, though. I very much appreciate. Well, you really have to come to. No, I don't, my friend. You need to see a bigger picture. You need to understand the other part of your religion. You're working on the practice side. You're not working on the spiritual side. When you begin to experience spiritual, then you realize what a power source nature is, what love is, what true unconditional love is. And those things you will see. Your children, one of the things that, in my case, my oldest boy, when he left and no longer wanted to be associated with us, one of the things that began to change him was he had a daughter, a little girl, my granddaughter, who is a bundle of joy, by the way. And all of a sudden, there was a different interpretation, a different understanding of life, of the reasons of life, of being there, of not being like everyone else just for the sake of being like everyone else. And he began to change. And his little girl now she's I think a first grader now. And so, he's a total turnaround. He's a totally different man than he was maybe even 3 years ago, much less 6 or 7 years ago. So time changes. Time is one of those things, or I should say, our perception of time is a great teacher and a great equalizer. It provides us with time to maybe get some spiritual influence that begins to change our hearts and changes the chemistry within our body to move away from darkness and hate and dislike and discontent and separatist, divisive type of thinking, and start becoming more inclusive and more just caring about others. One of the things I'm hopeful for is that one of the main tenements of Christianity is, of course, reaching out to the poor and the disenfranchised. This is one of those things that I think allows those who are stuck in their ways, those hardcore, can't change a minute muscle, allow those people to then begin to experience spirituality, spiritual connections with other people. And as we begin to do that more and more, it becomes more and more comfortable, and we become more and more kind of understanding of equality, of harmony, of peace. And we start seeing other people's perspectives. We start understanding a bigger picture of our existence. And I think, in my experience, I've seen people who have gone from, a total recluse to the other end of the spectrum in a matter of a lifetime. And so it's a choice, my friend. It's a choice we all have. And much like the Olympic athlete, once we make that choice, we simply have to not allow anything to get in the way. And that may include ourselves.
Yeah. One question one thing I wanted to get into with you a little bit is you seem like a very bright spiritual person, but yet some of the things that you're into, I'm not going to be prejudiced about them, but other people, I believe, will be. Because you believe in some really wild stuff. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I guess that would depend on what your determination of wild stuff is.
It's not meant as an insult. I just
no.
I'm trying to understand.
When I first started learning and exploring, going beyond what was in the Christian doctrine at the time for an ordained minister, I began to just really try to explore and expand my mind, and so I went and I learned all there was to learn. Well, quite a bit about the Nation of Islam. I learned about Judaism. I learned about Hinduism and Confucianism. I learned about the indigenous tribes of Australia and Americas and South Americas and even so far as to deal with much of the Eastern beliefs. And I began having dreams, and those dreams then became what I now know to be trances. Those trances then provided me with a series of knowledge level, wisdom, if you will, that I was able to kind of put together and understand, importantly, understand the values, the underlying values within those understandings, within those definitions that I received. And while I departed my belief in the doctrine of Christianity, the understanding, again, going back to Christianity on that little sliver that's to the left there, is called spirituality. Well, spirituality is a monstrous thing. It's huge. It's gargantuan. It's bigger than our universe. And this spirituality began to give more and more knowledge, and more patience, and more. I began to understand that I'm not always right. My perspective, I'm only one person with one set of eyes, and they usually look in the same direction. So I have a very limited perspective of what's going on around me. And in the big world, and maybe even in the little world sometimes. So as I began to gain more and more knowledge and more wisdom, I felt more and more comfortable with it. I came to a point where the doctrine of Christianity no longer sufficed, because the spiritual part of Christianity was being crushed by the practice part of it. And so they were crushing the true beliefs and the true understanding of spiritual connections and the spiritual connections with the world we live in. And so I expanded beyond them, and it got violent. I won't mix my words here. I was threatened. My wife was threatened. My children were threatened. To come back into the fold, to come back and put aside all this other stuff that I was now believing and teaching. Put away that stuff, because that's blasphemy and that's wrong. And I mean, so it got pretty harried for a while. We endured, and my wife came to a very stout Christian woman herself. She came to the realization that indeed the practice was crushing the spiritual part, and she didn't want to be a part of that anymore.
Yes. I mean, I believe that every religion has that problem to overcome, if they're going to overcome it. But so you went into something that most people haven't even heard about. I know I haven't. I wouldn't even pretend to try to pronounce the name that you go by with that.
The Alaska Ulfhednar.
There you go.
Yes.
Ulfhednar. So what is an Ulfhednar, and how did you get this? How did you think of this?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't have to think of it. The Ulfhednars were actually men from antiquity, roughly in the days of the Vikings in Scandinavia. Ulfhednars were very close in their function and form with the berserkers that everybody's familiar with. And these men, both the Ulfhednar and the berserker, were shock troops of the Norway. My generations come from Denmark, and they were special forces of their day the difference with the Ulfhednars is that the Ulfhednar had a spiritual connection. So we used the land spirits. We communicated with the spirits of the lands, and the spirits of the lands would rise up against our enemies. And so if you were an army marching upon Landvetti at the time, you might encounter a torrential downpour that would drown your army, or at least bog them down to where they couldn't move and couldn't travel, or trees would fall over in the roadway, boulders would fall off mountains and crush your army. And so these Landvetti, the Ulfhednar, then spent their days, because of their relationship with the Landvetti, spent their days as shamans for their chieftain, for a chieftain or a king or a jarl of Denmark and Norway and Sweden. And so these shamans would then, work with divinity, they would work with healing, they would work with the magic, and their connection with the Landvetti to help their clan, their tribe, to become successful and win the day. And so as far as the Ulfhednar, I began my journey back in history, looking at my genealogy, and that one step begat another, begat another, begat another. And I found out through writings of the time by Romans that 53 generations ago, my great-grandfather was inducted into a special group of men who wore wolf hides. Ulfhednar means wolf pelt. It's what it means in Old Norse. So Ulfhednars were of the wolf. We have a spiritual binding or a spiritual connection with wolves. And so my 53rd great-grandfather was inducted into the Ulfhednar in Denmark. And so that bloodline then gets handed down through the males all the way to me. And so the Alaska Ulfhednar is the 53rd generation Ulfhednar of Bjerrebysund, Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history of where that comes from. So I didn't have to think it up. Right. I just had to do some research.
Okay. So once you became a Ulfhednar, what does that mean as spiritually?
Really, for me, I had a vision. I describe it in my book, but I had a vision in January of 2020 where Odin visited me and confirmed my birthright, and it gave me the sight of this wisdom that I had been receiving in trances up to that point and beyond. I've received them as late as yesterday. And this knowledge, this wisdom, this intelligence is then written down with me, and then I kind of transcribe it and use it to help people to understand at a quantum level how spirituality affects their everyday life, and then give them the control, right? Because we can't control what we can't see or we don't know. So as they are given this control or this understanding, they're able to assume control of their own mental health. And they're able to kind of put their ducks in a row and start everything going in the direction that they want to go, and not the way they're being pulled by the fates of right. The same lore. And so as I've looked in and I've learned and I've grown, I have a huge connection to my ancestors there in Denmark, and I use their knowledge, their wisdom, their language of their understanding of spirituality to help people today find peace and find what they're looking for.
Okay, so now the $50 million question for me is, well, first of all, what is the universe? Okay. And second of all, what happens when your body dies? Do you have beliefs at all? Or
I do.
You don't? Okay, go ahead.
So the first question is, what is the universe? Well, the universe is simply the physical planet, which is created simply for the sole reason of creating an emotional interface to teach us empathy, to allow us to experience these experiences and allow us to grow in empathy towards others. That's the universe. The universe has two parts. It has a spiritual side, or a spiritual realm. It has a physical realm. Those two work in conjunction, much like an atom does. If you break apart an atom, you get the proton and the neuron and the electron. Well, in the reality of the life we live in, the physical realm is the protons and the neurons, which makes up the nucleus. And then the spiritual realm is that electron that's kind of floating around it. And so it really brings down the spiritual realm to being in the same time and the same space as the physical realm. They're not separate. They're one and the same. It's a duality model. And it's the way life is. Now, to your second point, once my physical existence is over and I drop this physical form, I return back as a spiritual entity to the universe, where I'm free to do assimilate all the knowledge that I've gained. B, I can provide insight for my descendants who call upon me and wish me, send me energy, and I send them energy, helping them grow, learn, and love. Or I can choose to do this again. If there's something that I did not learn, something I was not anticipating I wanted to learn, my soul is eternal. My spirit is eternal, and so I can choose to revisit the physical realm at any point in time. So I mean, I have a whole bunch of options. So for me, leaving the physical form is just stepping out of a scuba suit and getting on with life.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have that type of mind, I guess. I don't have that, belief, I guess is the word. To me, it keeps pounding me on the head that once I'm gone, I'm gone. And that to me is really bad. I mean, religions help to buffer that, I think, but there's no buffer. I have no buffer on myself. I'm a wild, open thinker, and it's just, I don't get it. I don't get what
you
is
have to think
a spiritual being, I guess. What is a spiritual being?
Think of yourself as a blade of grass, right? Think of yourself as a blade of grass for just a moment. You're going to live during the summer and you're going to go dormant in the winter, right? Some days, some summers, it may be so darn hot that you wither away and die. And that, the following fall, you get more fluids, you got more water, you get snow, you covered for a couple months, and the following spring, you're right back up at it. We have a tendency as humans to think of ourselves as this so unique form that we could never be replicated ever, ever, never, ever. The universe doesn't make single functions. It doesn't. It makes things that work, and that work religiously all the time across all the spectrums. So a blade of grass is no different than a human. A spider is no different than an elephant. They're all one and the same. They're all made the same way. They live the same way, and they move out of that physical form in the same way.
So how about this one last question, because I wish I could talk to you forever, but people lose their attention span. What is consciousness? What is it? How does it work? What is it?
Consciousness was constructed before time as we know it, and consciousness is a linear connection of energetic particles connected in such a way it creates a consciousness or a self-awareness. That self-awareness then determines the path of the rest of our existence. I will say, for your listeners, if they choose, they can go and Amazon or Barnes and Noble, take a look at the book. Turn to Final is the name of the book. It's my book. So shameless plug.
I was going to get to the
shameless plug.
Okay.
And in the book, it talks about that exact subject, as to how a consciousness is formed, why a consciousness was formed, and more importantly, how does a consciousness develop throughout its life cycle? Because we know our spiritual centers, or our consciousness, is a spiritual core, and that is eternal. It's not just for this physical realm. It's for eternity. And so all of our experiences go into this consciousness, and it's stored as energy that can be used for healing, growing, learning, loving, all of those things.
Do you have any other links you would like to give out?
The best link to get a hold of everything of ours, everything of mine, I should say. My assistants have done a bang up job at putting together our website, and our website is the Ulfhednar.com. AK for Alaska, ULF as in Frank, HED as in Delta, NAR.com. And from there, they can get the book. They can get an autographed copy of the book. You can download just all of our media, whether it be our video media, audio media, all of those things. So it's a great source to start with. It also gives a little bit more history about the Ulfhednars, what that is, shamanistic practices, what those are, and why they are so important, and more importantly, how do shamanistic practices apply to mental health.
Okay, and that will be in the description of this episode.
Excellent.
Any last final words of wisdom? You're an amazing man.
Thank you.
I didn't know what to think in the beginning, but I could see you're quite spiritual, and you found peace in this life, which is a plus as well. And maybe I'll get there someday. I don't know.
You will.
But is there anything that we missed, or you would want to leave our listener?
I just want to make sure that your listeners and you all know that, we get up every morning and we face a new set of experiences, and we have a choice as to how we will accept these experiences. And, we can look at them as just another day in the mine or another day in utopia. That perspective is completely up to us each and every minute, and each and every one of us has the authority and the power to do that. And if you go with that thought and you put that into practice, my friends, no one can stop you.
Okay. I'm very glad I got to meet you and talk to you. Like I said, you're very spiritual, which I enjoy talking about. Hopefully the listeners will as well. I think they will. And I just have to thank you for your time and good luck. And hopefully I'll talk to you again.
Thank you, and good luck to you. And I will send along energy for your relationship with your children. I pray that they will come back, and they will. Just takes time. They will grow.
Sounds
and
good.
For your listeners as well, may they be blessed, love and light. Thank you very much, my friend.
All right. Take care.